Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today is part 2 of the January wrap-up. In my last video, I told you guys I read 10 books and then my goal was to read another 10 because I really wanted to do 20 books for the month of January. And not only did I do it, but I did an additional 4. So the total for January was 24 books out of 200, which is my reading goal. So I am 7 books ahead of schedule right now. Very exciting. So we're just gonna jump right into it because I don't want to keep y'all too long. So let's get right in it. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the manga just to do it really quickly. So I read volumes 16, 17, and 18 for One Piece. Again, still really liking this. I need to get more volumes because this is the last one that I bought, so I don't have any more. Hopefully I'll be getting this for my birthday. We're still following Baroque Works. Still really good. Very, very excited. I got volume 4 of Soul Eater. I don't know if I talked about this, but this is one volume that I couldn't find in paperback for a while. I finally found it and still really good. I've said this before, I like Soul Eater. I really am enjoying rereading it because I always feel like I keep saying like, oh, I'm gonna rewatch that. Did I say reread? I meant I'm glad that I got to read it. I'm always saying that I want to rewatch it and then I never do. So I'm glad that I'm actually reading it. Still need to get some more volumes in between. It's gonna be a slow process, but that's all right. Really enjoyed. And lastly, I read volumes 1 through 5 of Fire Force. Now this is written by the same person that wrote Soul Eater. So if you're interested in reading this and you really like Soul Eater, you're most likely gonna like this too. The art style is very similar. Like the way the story flows is also very similar. But I also like the whole concept. So if you didn't know, basically in Fire Force, I don't know what time period we're in, how far in the future or whatever necessarily, but during this time, people randomly combust into flame. And because of this, there are like Fire Force, like firefighters who specialize in dealing with the people who spontaneously combust. So while we still have firefighters who put out the fires in the homes, we have these specialized forces that deal with the people that actually combust. And this has been happening for quite some time, and our main character is Shinra. He's like a 3rd generation of the first time that this ever happened. So he has some powers that deal with fire, so he can generate fire from his feet, which is really cool. Some people who are 2nd generation, they can't necessarily ignite their own flame, but they can manipulate fire. And then you have some characters who have a mix of both. When you meet that character in volume 5, he is one of the faves. But it's actually really interesting. Besides the fact that, okay, people spontaneously combust, there's another darker story going on besides the fact that, you know, people are dying like this. There is some type of organization that may be creating these, they're called infernals, people who spontaneously combust, and Shinra has to find out and figure out if he is part of one of those situations, because he lost his mother and his brother when he was a very young kid, and he was the only one that survived. But he believes that he saw something when his mom went up in flames, and he's not only been trying to find out what happened there, but also figure out why so many people are seeming to burst in flames. So there is a longer story or deeper story going on in the manga, and well, in the story in general. And it's really, really good. I definitely will say I'm probably going to finish the next 5 volumes that I own in the month of February because I'm really enjoying it. Okay, so the next book I finished, look at me, round of applause everybody, I finished a series that I own. I finished Girls of Fate and Fury by Natasha Nagon, and she is the one who wrote the Girls of Paper and Fire. This is the final book in the trilogy, and it was so good. I cannot remember what I rated it. I apologize. I'm gonna check back on it later. This was really good. Okay, I actually want to do a whole series review of this because I thought it was fantastic. This is the final like battle between the like revolution of the paper cast and the moon cast and some of the demon cast who are trying to take down the Demon King. At this point in the book, Ren and Lee are separated. You will know why when you read the 2nd book. I'm not going to give too much away. And then we're trying to take them down, y'all. And this was fantastic. So for a quick kind of review of how I liked the series, I think overall I would definitely give it a 5-star. I liked the way this ended. I think the thing I like the most about it in general is I like to see books where women win. And I don't really care if people don't like the sound of that. I genuinely like books like this where the main characters are women. Yes, in this series, they go through quite a lot. I've talked about in other videos. There are some content and trigger warnings in this book. But overall, a lot of the female characters that you meet are very strong. They're very layered. And, you know, I'm not going to tell you exactly what happens in the end, but we're winning. Okay, there you have it. Deal with it. So that's what I like so much about this. I love the ending. They've come so far, and hopefully there is, you know, in this world, there's hope for the future that it will continue to be what it is at the end of the book. But I would absolutely recommend it. I enjoyed it. I think that for like for a young adult fantasy, I think all these books are pretty short. Well, I didn't even know what the page was. Should probably check. Well, it's a little under 500 pages. I think that's kind of standard, but they're very quick reads. There's a lot of commentary about, you know, power dynamics, caste systems, so on and so forth. So I would absolutely recommend. The next book I read, which I will be giving its own like special review video for, was The Violence by Delilah S. Dawson. So I got that early last year from NetGalley, and I read it the last week of January because I realized, oh, this comes out on February 1st. I should really read it. And I loved it. I rated this book 5 stars. If you go on Goodreads, there's some mixed reviews. Some people like it, some people don't. I loved it. Mainly because, like I said earlier, I love books where women win. Give it to me all day. All day, every night. So The Violence is taking place kind of during but after COVID, which was a little unsettling to read. I've put that in my review, so I don't necessarily feel like I'm giving anything away. That's just kind of the time that this story is taking place. But after, you know, people have lived through COVID, there's a vaccine for it like we've had now. There is a new type of pandemic, a new type of virus that happens, and it's called the violence. And when somebody gets it, they basically black out, they assault someone, kill someone, and then they're fine after that, and they don't have a memory of killing anybody. So it happens slowly. And we are following 3 different point of views, which is Chelsea, our main character, Chelsea Martin. She's a mother. We're following her daughter, Ella, and we're also following Chelsea's mother, Patricia. And there are definitely some unlikable characters in this book. Chelsea's life in particular is that of, she's a victim. Her mother has been an abuser of her since she was a kid, and then she's in an abusive marriage. And when this and his violence has been escalating against her for quite some time. So when something like this appears, the violence, where if you call a tip line, that person gets taken away, it's kind of like the perfect opportunity for Chelsea. Now, I'll stop there because I kind of saw that coming. I was very excited. You kind of get the point. It happens very early on. But the thing I like the most about this book is that of the 3 point of views that we see, all 3 of these women have some type of generational trauma. And even though it's taking place, I think, like, let's just say 5 months is the time period, in the time frame that we're really talking about. A lot happens in those 5 months to heal some of that generational trauma. So while the plot that you see on Goodreads and maybe on the back of the book is, oh, the violence, you know, people are killing people, this is horror, it's gory. Yes, all those things are true. It's not like it's a new concept, you know, that you're reading about somebody like going into zombie mode and just killing people, right? But there's more to it than that. And that's what made me rate this 5 stars. I can see how somebody who reads the Goodreads synopsis and then looks at the very bottom of the page and sees like the tags for it would probably feel kind of disappointed that it's not so much like horror. Like, unlike when I read Under the Blade in January earlier on, that's like very much horror. There's some other plots going on, but it's very much horror. This to me is more thriller, and then, you know, it's more about character development. So that's another thing I really like the book. You have intense character development in this, and it's not just overnight, which I know can be annoying for some people. Like I said, it's taking place in like 5 months. You have some great moments in this book that are gonna have you like turning the page. It was like that for me. But you also have some like one-liners that are made in it that really stood out to me. Let me read one. So one of the quotes that really stood out to me, and I put this on Goodreads, was, "What do you do when you're changed to a monster that isn't particular about what it destroys?" That had me like put the book down for a minute and go, ooh, damn. So I feel like Delilah Dawson, we're definitely talking about the violence that is going on in terms of this virus, but also the violence inflicted against women. So could you say that this is a feminist book? Sure. Just like you could say Women's War is a feminist book that's on the front cover of Women's War. I don't personally feel like that's beaten over your head, but some people might disagree. It is what it is. But I also like the commentary about vaccines, about underground efforts to protect everyone, capitalism. So there's some other things that are going on in this book besides just, someone might kill me. And that's why I think that you should read it. Okay, that was a little bit longer than I anticipated me talking about it, so I apologize. But with that being said, I loved that book. I rated it 5 stars. And the last few books I read in January are going to be nonfiction. So one of the books I read was a memoir, and it was called Word of the State, a Memoir of Foster Care by Carlos Dillard. If you don't know who Carlos Dillard is, and like if you haven't seen his videos on TikTok, he talks about his time as a foster care, as a child in foster care, and as his time when he was adopted. And he and some other creators who were former like adopted children talking about their experience and how it wasn't good. And then speaking out against the adoption machine and the foster care machine, which, you know, for some people, there are conversations going on that they don't like and they feel like are unpopular. But I think when you read a book like this and you understand and you listen to people who've been in the foster care system, or you listen to people who have had really terrible experiences with adoption, I don't think that those takes are bad. That's just my opinion. So I rated this about 3 stars. It's hard to say that you like a book that's so sad because the subject matter is really sad. But in general, I thought it's a book that people should read. It's very quick, by the way. I read it on my Kindle. And basically Carlos is talking about it kind of starts the first day that he's basically taken from his mother, and his siblings are taken from his mother and put into foster care. His mom was abusing drugs and also dealing drugs, married to a man. I'm not sure if they were married, but dating a man who was abusing Carlos. And his mother had just kind of disappeared for a while, and he and his older brother couldn't get into their house. They went back to school, and they saw a teacher, and a teacher basically called CPS, and they were literally just taken. So that's obviously very traumatic, to just be taken and then you're not really like told what's going on, really. And then there just starts the roller coaster of his life in foster care, from home to home, dealing with abuse. He'd already dealt with abuse in his own home, unfortunately, but also dealing with abuse, physical and sexual, within these foster families that he was in. And the way it ends is crazy, because if you follow him on TikTok, you know that the person that he ends up being adopted by, it was a very, very bad experience. So it ends almost, if you didn't know that, you might think, oh, everything was fine, he got adopted. No. So definitely follow him on TikTok if you're interested in knowing more. Because he didn't put that in the book, which I thought was like, I would, I haven't watched every single one of his TikToks. But some of the things that stood out about this book, Jesus. Okay. I will never understand why a family that is going to foster children, and they have their own biological children, treat the foster children so poorly. He talks about the times when he was with families with his sister, because he was separated from the other people in his family, where he and the other people, the other kids who were foster kids, they didn't get to eat the same food as the real family. The real family got to eat pizza and all this good food while they had to eat like canned beans. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you be so cruel? That is something I will never understand. Being so cruel to children. You're getting paid to house these children, by the way, which I know this all kind of, it basically comes down to money. These people are getting money. That money would have been better used to probably the mom to get her out of the situation that she was in so that her family wouldn't have to be torn apart. But you get money for these kids and you can't even buy an additional pizza for the kids that you choose to house. Very, very disgusting to read stuff like that. I hate it, and I hate when I hear about things like that. It's terrible. He dealt with families that were abusive, sexually and physically. He was clearly having behavioral issues because hello, I've been stripped from my family. No one really cares about what's going on with me emotionally. I'm treated differently because I'm the foster kid at school. I've been sexually assaulted, but I can't say anything. And they just keep putting him in a different house, one after another, and no one has that moment of having a conversation with I know he's a kid, but that's not the point. So it just is really sad to read about how awful the foster care system can be and how it does fail so many kids and families. So with that being said, it's hard to say it was a good book because it's so sad. This is his life. But with that being said, I would say give it a read. Absolutely give it a read. Follow him on TikTok. He is, I think, in a better place now. He's married. He's happy. He has a podcast. He wrote a book. So it's really been nice to follow him and see where he's gone, and then also follow the conversation about other people who were adopted as kids or in the foster care system, and just kind of like the reality of that, since so many people think that, oh, it's fine, just kind of have them be adopted. It's not always that great. So yes, there's that book. The next book I read was Playing the Whore, The Work of Sex Work by Melissa Gira Grant. I rated this 3 stars. Very, very short little book. I'm disappointed that it took me so long to finish it, considering it's barely 100 pages, but I would definitely recommend. I would say the best way to kind of sum this up is sex workers' demands, too long relegated to the margins, take center stage. Sex work is work and sex workers' rights are human rights. This is going over like the myths and the stigmas that sex workers endure, how this journalist, Melissa Gira Grant, like this is like 10 years of her work that she's kind of condensed into this book. How oftentimes when she was in spaces that were supposed to be pro-sex work, oftentimes the language was like super sanitized. How when people are trying to bring light to people who are in the sex work industry, oftentimes they want this sad story, when sometimes it's not a really sad story, but also you are not entitled to my story for me to get help, for you to change the laws so it protects women and men, so on and so forth, who are in the sex work industry. And that you need to acknowledge that sex work is work, and it's not just, you know, the bad stereotype and stigmas that people keep putting on it. So for something that's so short, I would absolutely recommend it. I mean, it's a quick read. You could probably read it faster than I did. Sorry about that. Makes me sad. But I would absolutely recommend it, especially if you feel like you want to learn a little bit more about it. If you have friends who are in this industry, I would recommend that you read it. Always support your friends that are in sex work, no matter what. And lastly, the book I just finished, Without Apology, The Abortion Struggle Now by Jenny Brown. 5 stars, so good. Now this one, I did a better job with reading very quickly. It's under 200 pages. As you can see, I annotated. I did some, you know, underlining in here. This is a great book. I know, I think the last time I talked about the books that I wanted to read, and I mentioned this, I said that I'm pretty sure that if you wanted to read something like this, and you wanted to like kind of like dip a toe into like the conversation about being pro-choice, read Katha Pollitt's book. I think it's called Pro. I'll put a picture of it up here. Really, really great. I loved that book. I read Pro basically when Donald Trump became president, because I was very scared. As you know, Pence. Mike Pence was the vice president, and he's very religious, and I was very scared. Now I'm even more scared in 2022, which is sad. Shouldn't be that way. So this was a great read. It's not just talking about you being pro-choice. It's also giving you stats, history, and other conversations about what it means to really be pro-choice. Now, I'm pro-choice. I'm also pro-abortion. But I think that this book brought up a lot of good points about how it's not just about being pro-choice, about me being someone who's pro-abortion, but also like, I want you to have the choice to have a child, be a stay-at-home mom, be a working mom, be a single mom. If you don't want to actually interact with a man, I don't blame you. All of those scenarios, but also we have to talk about how like capitalism is always going to unfortunately end up not being supportive of you. So some of the things that I wanted to read on the channel for you guys, which I think are really important when we're having these conversations. And I will say this, so I'm going to read this passage, and it's about the abortion right. But in the book, Jenny Brown does not just like focus on the right, because at the end of the day, there are also corporate Democrats who are not doing enough for abortion rights and women's reproductive health. So while I'm going to read this passage and it deals with the right, just know that if you read this book, she's not just like focusing all of her energy on the right. It's also, you know, coming for the Democrats who are not doing enough. And I agree. The abortion right prefers to attribute regrets in these cases to the abortion itself and not to the conditions women face. They don't want to focus on the things we need in order to be good and happy parents. Wages and work hours that allow us to comfortably support dependents, for example, or men doing half the housework, or guaranteed quality health care and child care, paid parental leave, well-funded schools, parks, museums, libraries, summer camps, and after-school programs. The right doesn't want to discuss these issues because improving our conditions would involve either substantial employer costs or public expenditure necessitating taxation of the rich. The leaders of the anti-abortion movement are considerably more protective of corporate profits and tax breaks than they are of fetuses. So I will say this, I don't argue with anti-choice people. I'm 32, I'm about to be 32. I don't have conversations with people who their only thing is going to be my opinion as a fact and do abortion. I mean, do adoption, because just like that passage said, there's so many things that you could do in this country. Not only do I believe that everybody should have access to abortion on demand, it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, which I think kind of ties back into playing the whore, where the conversation is about like, I don't need as a sex worker to have a sad story for you to care. You should just care about the working conditions that we're having to go through. It's the same thing here. I shouldn't have to experience the worst things just in order to have an abortion. Those people who endure that stuff absolutely have every right to get an abortion if that's what they want. But if I don't want to have children, I don't want to have children. And I don't owe you a sad story, and I shouldn't have to experience those things to have access to it. So hopefully that made sense, because I already forgot where I was going with it. And then the last thing I also underlined, so again, especially if you like this, you should also read Hood Feminism. So, this is why reproductive justice argues that abortion and birth control can't be understood separately from housing, jobs, wages, healthcare, policing, racial and sexual hierarchies, immigration, and environmental health. So to be pro-choice, you have to understand those things, much like when we're talking about being an intersectional feminist. There's so many other things that intersect, and it's not just as simple as, you know, I just want an abortion. There is that, but there's more to it. And people should have access to all of those things as well. Because just like I, as somebody who is married, and me and my husband do not want to have children, if I have friends who have children and they shouldn't have to go back to work after a week of having a baby or 2 weeks, whatever the short time period it is for having a child in America, those people should have all of those things mentioned to have a healthy family. It just seems unfortunate that it is more important to have our labor at the cheapest cost possible for them, but the highest cost for us and other people. And I like the fact that the other part, or towards the end of this book, when she's talking about the activism that has happened for years in America and in other parts of the world, that when we're talking about being pro-choice, pro-abortion, reproductive rights, we have to stop focusing on, or we have to stop letting them, the other side, make it all fear-based. We have to have more people openly talking about their experiences with abortion, because, like I mentioned, some people have horrifying stories and some people don't. But ultimately, with the information that's in here, abortion really isn't that scary. The vast majority of people who get abortions, at least in this country, they're getting a pill, 2 pills that you take. That should be something that's over the counter, in my opinion. We should have access to the morning after pill and the abortion pill over the counter. That's just how I feel. But it's not scary. It's not scary. But then the next step, when you're a little bit further along, that part is also not scary. And people just need to be able to be more honest and open, and we cannot allow the other side to dictate how that story comes out and make it all fear, 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 when in reality, it's really not that scary what actually happens. Oftentimes, like, the things that the other side do make it so gory and horrifying when it's not like that. It's not pulling out something piece by piece. That's not what happens. Thank you very much. All of that stuff has been debunked. Anyway, regardless, I would definitely recommend that you read this book, whether you're somebody who, like me, is, you know, usually reading books like this anyway, and I'm someone who is pro-choice, pro-abortion. If you're somebody who, maybe you're on the fence, you don't quite know how you feel, read this book. If you're somebody who wants to learn more about the history of things that women have had to endure in this country and all across the globe, the activism, read this book. And if you just want to learn, read the book. It's just not that long. It's under 200 pages. You can do it. All right. So that was my January part 2 wrap up. I'm sorry if I went on and on. I'm sitting here now and I'm like, how long did I go on talking about some of those books? So I apologize. So thank you so much for watching. Are any of these seem interesting to you? I would love to know if there's any of the nonfiction books that you guys are interested in reading. I'd love to know your opinions. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, please like the video. If you like it, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Thank you so much for everybody who still follows me, who subscribes to me. I really, really appreciate you guys. So yes, thank you so much. Have a good day. Goodbye.